Good morning, Year 4. It's Mrs. Dunn here with your daily maths lesson. Today is the 27th of January. Hope you're all okay. The first thing we're going to do today is use that daily 10 game again that we've been using for the last few days. But today we're going to look at the value of the digit that is highlighted yellow. So let's have a look at the game. You will need a pencil and a piece of paper to jot down your answers. If you need to go and get one, please pause the video now and then come back to me. Okay, so you're going to get asked 10 questions. I'll read the question to you, and what I want you to do is write down the value of the yellow digit. Okay, I'm going to give you 15 seconds to answer each question. Okay, so what is the highlighted digit worth in 3083? So you need to write the value. Don't just tell me it's the ones number. You need to write how much it's worth. What is the highlighted digit worth in 8059? Question 3. What is the highlighted digit worth in 3280? Question 4. What is the highlighted digit worth in 2946? Question 5. What is the highlighted digit worth in 1652? Question 6. What is the highlighted digit worth in 6178? Question 7. What is the highlighted digit worth in 4467? Question 8. What is the highlighted digit worth in 1708? Question 9. What is the highlighted digit worth in 4703? And finally, what is the highlighted digit worth in 2362? Okay, let's reveal the answers. Then you can pause the video and mark your work. Okay, pause the video now and you can mark your work. Okay, welcome back Year 4. Hopefully you did really well on those. Today we're going to be estimating our answers by rounding. Rounding is a skill that we practiced quite a lot last week. We did 2 lessons and we did a problem solving lesson on Friday. So we should be really good at rounding. Can you pause the video and write today's date, underline it, and then write today's learning objective? I can estimate answers by rounding. Pause the video now and then come back to me when you've written them. Okay, so here on the screen are some of the words that we're going to be using today. So we're combining 2 skills. We're combining the skill of rounding to the nearest 10 and the nearest 100. We're also going to be combining that with the skill of column addition or column subtraction, which we've been doing earlier this week. So it's a chance to practice two of the skills you've just learnt. Let's have a look at the first question. So on the screen I have got a question and I need to estimate the answer to the following calculation by rounding to the nearest 10. So what I have to do is round the 163 to the nearest 10. Then I have to round the 115 to the nearest 10. And when I've rounded those numbers, I then do a calculation. This gives us a rough estimate of the total. This is a subtraction calculation. So in my keys to success, where it says use column addition or subtraction to add or subtract to the numbers you have rounded, I'm going to be subtracting. Let me show you exactly what to do, and I'm going to use my rounding line for each of those numbers to help me. When you come to do today's work, those rounding frames are uploaded into Teams again, so you can use those to help you. If you haven't got a printer to print them, then you can just draw a line on your paper like I have. So first of all, I'm going to round 163 to the nearest 10. Now I remember from last week that when I'm rounding to the nearest 10, it's that ones digit I need to look at. And if my ones digit is a 1, 2, 3 or 4, I round down. So 160 are my choices and 170. So I think that because this number has 3 in the ones column, I'm going to have to round down. So if I think about where 163 is going to be, it's going to be about here. So I can see visually that it is closer to 160. So 160 is the number in my calculation that I'm going to put first. Now I need to think about 115. So I know that 110 comes before 115, and the next multiple of 10 would be 120. And 115 is it's just smack in that middle there. So if I look at the 5, the rule of rounding to the nearest 10 tells me if there is a 5 in the ones column, then I round up to the next multiple of 10. So this number here is going to round up to 120. So that is the next number in my calculation. So I'm not calculating with the original numbers, I'm using the numbers that I've rounded to. So looking back and reminding myself, this was a takeaway. So 0 take away 0 is 0. 6 take away 2 is 4, and 1 take away 1 is 0. So an estimate for this calculation would be 40. Let's have a look at another one. Okay, estimate the answer to the following calculation by rounding to the nearest 10. So this time it's an addition calculation, but I am still rounding to the nearest 10. So if I look at 272, 272 is either going to round to 270 or 280. If I look at the twos digit, the ones digit, sorry, and see that number 2, if my number has 1, 2, 3 or 4 ones, then I have to round down. So 272 is going to round down to 270. Now I look at my next number, and it's either going to round down to 360 or up to 370. I know that when I am rounding and there are 5 ones, I have to round up to the next multiple of 10, which would be, for this number, 370. Now I'm going back to check and I can see that this is an addition calculation. So I've now got to use my column addition skills to add these two numbers together. 0 add 0 is 0. 7 add 7 is 14. I can only put the 4 and then I've got to exchange. 2 add 3 add 1 is 6. So a rough estimate to this calculation would be 640. Let's have a look at another one. This time we're going to be rounding to the nearest 100. It's really important that we look carefully at the question so that we know what we're rounding to. Some of the questions today will be rounding to the nearest 10, but some of them will be rounding to the nearest 100. So if I'm looking at rounding to the nearest 100, I'm looking at that tens digit. So if I draw my lines to help me to round, let's have a look what each number would round to. So I'm starting off with my 386. Looking at my 8 tens, it's either going to round to 300, remember the numbers on the end of these lines are going to be multiples of 100, or it's going to round up to 400. Thinking about the 8, the 386 is going to be about here. But I also know that when I'm rounding to the nearest 100, the same rule applies. If the digit is a 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9, then I must round up. So the first number here is going to round to 400. Now I'm going to look at my 321. I can hear that 300. So I know that's my first multiple of 100. And the multiple that comes after that will be 400. Now I'm looking at my tens number here, and I think that my number's going to be about here on my number line. 321. Thinking about my rule of rounding, if you're using these rounding frames, you can see visually now that the number will round to 300. But if you're not, you need to remember that rule, that if the digit is a 2, then we round down to the multiple of 100 before it. So the number here that we're rounding to would be 300. And I'm looking back and just checking, and this is an addition calculation. 0 add 0, oh, I haven't drawn my answer line, have I? I must remember to do that. So 0 add 0 is 0, and then it's the same here, 0 add 0. And then 4 add 3 is 7. So an estimated answer to this calculation would be 700. Let's try one more just before you go to do your independent work. So this time I'm trying to calculate 548 take away 235, and I'm going to round each of those numbers to the nearest 100. So if I look at my first number, 548, well, I can hear that 500, and I know that if I'm counting in hundreds, the next multiple would be 600. And I also know that when I'm rounding to the nearest 100, it's that tens digit that I look at. 548. If the number has got 4 tens, I round down to the 100 before. So we would have 500. Now I'm looking at my 235, so the multiple of 100 that I can hear is the 200. If I'm counting in hundreds, I would then say 300. And I'm looking at that tens number, and I would say that my number's about here, 235. I know that if the number has 3 tens, I round down to the 100 before. So the number that I've rounded down to is 200. Checking back at the calculation, it's a takeaway this time. So I'm going to subtract using column subtraction. And I'm going to subtract. These ones are really easy to do in your head, but some of those rounding to 10 ones you will need to do the actual method. So 0 take 0, 0 take 0, and 5 take away 2 is 3. So our estimated answer would be 300. Okay, so your work today is on maths.co.uk. You should have a test that has been set called Estimate Answers, 27th of the 1st, 21. There is a scaffold, there are the little rounding frames uploaded in Teams, and for the stretch today there is also a challenge for you uploaded in Teams as well with the answers. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and then come back to me and we can have a look at a reasoning question and also the plenary. Any issues year 4, remember to give me an email, okay? Send me an email and we'll sort it out for you. Okay, pause the video now and then come back to me when you're done. Okay, so here is our reasoning question for today. I'd like you to spot the mistake. So the question is, estimate the answer by rounding to the nearest 10. And the question was 569 add 345 equals, and this was the answer that I've written down. So can you spot my mistake, please? And then can you work out what the correct calculation would be? Pause the video and then come back to me for the answer. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to spot my mistake today. So the question said, estimate the answer by rounding to the nearest 10. Looking in the calculation here, I've rounded to the nearest 100, not the nearest 10. So the correct calculation would have been looking at the ones digits and then rounding to the nearest 10. So 569 would have become 570 and 345 would have become 350. So that would be the calculation that I wanted you to do. So 0 add 0 is 0, 7 add 5 is 12, and 5 add 3 add 1 is 9. So the estimate should be 920. What is really clear to see though is how close the answers are, even if you're rounding to the nearest 10 or the nearest 100. Okay, let's have a look at our, what our learning objective was today. So today we were estimating answers using rounding. We needed to answer questions by rounding to either the nearest 10 or the nearest 100. Some of us will have done that using the rounding frames. Some of us will have just done that using the rules of rounding. You needed to use column subtraction or addition to add or subtract the numbers you've rounded. So it gave you another chance to build on that skill. Tomorrow we're going to continue to build on that addition and subtraction, and we're going to be solving two-step problems. I'll have a look at your work on maths.co.uk. I don't close the test until the next morning, so the test that you've done today, I'll close it tomorrow morning and have a look at your answers then, just to give everybody a chance to have a go. As always, Year 4, if there are any questions, please ask in the live sessions, or you can always email us at the Year 4 email address. Have a lovely day and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye Year 4.